We're back with another episode of the Nebraska Football Show. Maybe the penultimate episode of the Nebraska Football Show. We'll obviously have, a postseason show and some stuff before the bowl game, but I mean, this is it. Regular season's coming to a close here on Friday. Nebraska takes on Iowa, 6:30 p.m. Central Time. Steve, we're coming off of a Nebraska clinching the bowl game. Before we get too far into the Iowa preview, Nebraska just clinched a bowl game. 44-25 over Wisconsin. Best offensive performance of Matt Rule's tenure, not just of this season, but best offensive output of Matt Rule's tenure here at Nebraska. And kind of days removed from that game. Obviously, we can talk about the defense and some of the issues there, but offensively, like how much of that feels lasting? Because a lot of that feels like stuff they can take and immediately just turn around and use the exact same stuff against Iowa, and it should be able to be effective.
Yeah, when you look at that Wisconsin game and then you compare it to what Nebraska is going to be walking into in Iowa City, I think there's going to be a lot of similarities to how that game against the Badgers went and what Nebraska is wanting to do against the Hawkeyes. But yeah, I think what we saw on Saturday against Wisconsin is some stuff to build on. I think we saw the benefit of just having Dana Holgorsen and Dylan Raiola in a room together for an extra week. I think we saw how much that helped things. Dylan looked different. He looked like pre-records Dylan Raiola. He looked comfortable. He looked really confident. That RPO read that he made and threw over the middle to Ja'Cory Barney was absolutely beautiful. He was looking like a gunslinger, dropping that elbow, changing the way he throws the football and just like slung it in there just like in a split second. I mean, that was like when I saw that, I was like, oh, I went audibly like, oh, in the press box. Like he looked good. He looked comfortable. He looked confident in what Dana Holgorsen was calling. And I think Dana, he was showing even more wrinkles, new wrinkles than what he showed at USC, his first game calling the plays. So I liked it. And I think that you're absolutely right, Tim. They're going to be doing a lot of that same stuff on Iowa and seeing if they can beat it.
Yeah, when went back and rewatched, I mean, my first thought watching a lot of that was, hey, what's crazy is not crazy, but I mean, this is just competent offensive play calling
Yeah.
and coordination. There's a lot of stuff they ran for the first time on Saturday that Iowa has not seen before. That they're going to have to be prepared not just for what they ran off of that look, but what other things they could run off that look. Like for example, those two back sets where you have Emmett Johnson and is it Dante on the other side?
Emmett Johnson and Dante Dowdell in that two back 21
Mhm.
personnel. I don't think Dante and Emmett have been on the field at the same time
At all. No.
before that first play against Wisconsin. So yeah, Mike Tressel, the Wisconsin defensive coordinator, had to be pretty surprised. And that was the 21 personnel, the two back. That was a new wrinkle that I thought we saw that I really kind of found interesting because Dana was doing some different things out of that. He wasn't just throwing out of it; he was running out of it too.
For sure, and my point on that formation, and they also ran that with a two back with they motioned either Ja'Cory Barney into or out of that two back.
Hmm.
There's so much you can run off of that. You can run little swing screens. You can motion them out, and run little swing screens. And more than anything, too, in the run game, when this year there have been times where Nebraska hasn't been able to get things going. Obviously, it feels like they're starting to get things going, but when you can't, it's all about misdirection. It's all about timing. And right now, the one run play they ran out of that two back set is this little insert where they have Dante kind of insert as a insert as a
Yeah.
blocker, and
Hmm.
Emmett followed behind. You can also do, I mean, we saw it the very next day, I believe was the Packers ran it, where it's off of that two back set where you fake the handoff one way, then you motion the line the other way and have and have kind of like a handoff behind the quarterback. There's so much misdirection you can do with that where defenses have to be accountable now for runs to both sides of the line. And that's when Nebraska, a team that has not been able to run the ball effectively, consistently this year, that's how you create a numbers advantage. And that's how you create keep a defense on their toes and force them to account for a lot of different things. So I'm interested to see how many different looks we get on Friday. Just based off what we saw. We saw the at the end the wheel to Ramir Johnson. On the
Yep.
backside of that, Janiran
Wasn't.
Bonner is wide open on his own wheel route.
Yeah.
So we're going to see
Yeah.
something
Two
like
wheel
that.
routes.
Yeah, we're like that yo-yo motion. Nebraska
Yep.
kind of used that as eye candy on Saturday. I mean,
Hmm.
they're you could play run some plays off of that and get some open looks on Friday off of that motion. So yeah, I mean, again, just this is what having a guy like Dana Holgorsen in the offense does, and Matt Rule said it on Monday, and I thought this caught my attention more than anything. He came up in the air raid world, but he's not an air raid coach, and Rule kind of touched on that. Like what he's running is not air raid. It's football. It's just football. It's like it's a handful of different things. That's a multiple offense essentially, but there's an emphasis on running the football. There's an
Hmm.
emphasis of getting the ball to playmakers in space. They're not running five wide. They're not running four wide. They're not running empty pass protection. Like they have 5 6 in there. They're running heavy sets, in the on the goal line and in short yardage situations. This is a multiple offense with one of the better minds in the country running it.
And what I think all of that is built from, and why Dana is doing what he's doing, is to help out the quarterback. And I think that the quarterback is loving it right now. Dylan Raiola, again, we talked about it earlier. He looked cool, calm, collected, confident back there. And a lot of the things that we saw was, I think, to help Dylan feel all of that, and to get his confidence back, and to have him have some fun out there and feel like his old self again. And I think that's exactly what we saw. It's the Ja'Cory Barney stuff really kind of reminded me of Dana Holgorsen 2011 West Virginia with Tavon Austin. How he was in the backfield taking some handoffs sometimes, those little touch passes, pop passes, getting Ja'Cory on the move in the backfield. That little kind of short motion where Ja'Cory would like motion out a few yards and come at the snap, he'd start sprinting and take a handoff to get a little momentum. I love all that stuff. And then you see the perimeter blocking showing up again. Jamal Banks, I think, has really kind of made a statement with some of his blocking this past game or two. Since Dana has shown up, I think that area has been better, which is a little wild to say, but it has. Janarian Bonner has done well in that area too. The the additions of Nate Borkacher and Luke Lindenmeyer at tight end really kind of caught my eye too. And it really seemed that Thomas Fidone, who he started the game, but he didn't play most of the game. He was benched after that false start that he had, that I think really, really irritated the offense and Dana Holgorsen. And so Dana, pulling no punches, he's like, okay, get out. I'm going to use these two guys. And it went well. Nate Borkacher, I think, impressing people with what he can do as a receiver. He's always been a well-rounded receiver, but he is. I really liked what he showed. He caught two passes for a little under 30 yards. He was doing a lot of things, a lot of the same things that Thomas Fidone can do. But I think Bork kind of gives you a little bit more in the run game as a blocker, and he's a serviceable pass catcher too. And then Luke Lindemeyer, he was in those yo-yo motions too, doing some of that, and as a run blocker. So he just like those 12 personnel sets. When Nebraska wants to get downhill, those have been effective, and I'm sure we're going to see more of that against Iowa's defense. But yeah, I mean, it was a there was a lot of things on the game against Wisconsin that I think that Nebraska can build off of, and there's going to be new wrinkles, I'm sure, for this Iowa game. It's going to be cold. It's going to be 20s in the 20s. I'm sure that Nebraska's going to want to kind of run the football and do things that way. It's going to be a game plan, I think, Tim, very similar to the Wisconsin game where Iowa is going to come in. They have quarterback issues. Jackson Stratton it's looking like he's going to get the start. At one point this season, he was a scout team linebacker. He's a former transfer from Colorado State. So Iowa has some issues at quarterback right now, but they don't have issues in that run game. And with Caleb Johnson at running back, that's almost an elite looking run game that Nebraska has. So if the black shirts, if Tony White's crew can find a way to limit Iowa's run game and put all the pressure and put some pressure on Jackson Stratton and that pass game, I think we could see good things for Nebraska in this one.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's a very similar game plan to what you have for Wisconsin on both sides of the ball. But the difference is, I think here is Caleb Johnson is one of the best running backs in the country. besides Ashton Genty, I mean, objectively, I think he's been the second best back this year. He just he's been explosive. He does so much, past the line of scrimmage, breaking tackles, and just hitting home runs essentially. But he's a guy that obviously you have to account for. Luke Lashie, a tight end, another one worth keeping an eye on. The difference here is offensively the quarterback issue is still there, but out wide they don't have the same type of personnel that can beat you one on one the way Wisconsin's could. Like that was the thing with Wisconsin was they have individual receivers that can
Mhm.
beat you one on one. We saw it on Saturday. They did it. And
Yeah.
so Iowa doesn't necessarily have those type of athletes out wide. Nebraska should be able to hold. For the most part, this is it's a somewhat easier game for the secondary, but up front it's a tougher test. In the run game, essentially, for the run defense and for the front seven, it's a tougher test for them. On the flip side of the field, when Nebraska's on offense, this is a tougher secondary.
Oh yeah.
This is a tougher secondary, and yeah, they're missing some people, but Xavier Nwankpa was one of the better safeties in the country coming out of high school. He's played well this season. Sebastian Castro, kind of moves between like that
Castro's huge.
rover and yeah,
Hmm.
I think that's a future NFL player right there. And
Quinn Schulte has a big time veteran back there. Quinn Schulte is at safety. He's played a lot of football, so they have young guys who are really really talented, but also some veterans back there who have they know what this rivalry game is about. They have played in multiple of them, so yeah, it's gonna be a good defense. I mean, it's a Phil Parker defense. What else?
yeah,
I'd love to ask Dana Holgorsen, what he sees on tape from this Iowa defense because I'm a huge Phil Parker fan. He's been doing this thing forever, and he's been just year after year after year putting together strong defenses. He's just like a staple of college football defense right now.
for sure. And yeah, his evolution as well, just like over the years and adapting to the way the game is played now and
Yeah.
acquiring elite athletes in the secondary to keep up. That's been I think the most impressive part of his development and what I was done and how they built that program up. When you're talking about and when Nebraska's on offense, like who are you watching for this week? Like, obviously it's going to be looking for Emmett Johnson again, but what are you looking for? Um, and who are guys you think that can that can be difference makers? Because I feel like this is a game where, specifically in the past game, you have to win some of these one-on-one matchups.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Ja'Cory Barney is one that kind of pops to mind just because of how prevalent he's been in the offense and how much Dana Holgorsen seems to really like what Barney can do. But it's going to be the run game, the weather conditions that these two teams are going to be playing with. I think you're going to see a lot of runs. I think it might be a pretty short game. Who knows? But I think Nebraska is really going to want to establish a run game, control the line of scrimmage. But again, it's going to be tough. But to Nebraska's credit, Donovan Raiola and Aaron Coling, their offensive line has really taken a step forward. I thought I had fun watching that unit against Wisconsin because they were delivering some really kind of impact making blocks. I mean, everybody was doing a good job up there, the tight ends included. So when you start playing like Nate Borkacher and Luke Lindemeyer instead of Thomas Fidone, I think you can really kind of make it a point to run the football right at somebody, and I think that's what we're going to be seeing. And obviously, I think Dana has seen the success with Dylan with shorter routes, getting the ball out of his hand. He's a really confident quarterback when he can do that, and he's really accurate. And he kind of showed that swagger that he kind of started the game with. Lost it kind of midway through the season, but now it looks like he's kind of regained it because of Dana Holgorsen. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be a really good game. I wouldn't be surprised if this was another one score, 50-50 toss up game, just like it always seems to be.
Yeah, with yeah, I'm interested to see. I'm kind of touching on the tight end situation, Thomas Fidone and Nate Borkacher, and Luke Lindemeyer. Uh, did you notice? And maybe it was just me and just like a personal thing. Like maybe I'm just crazy. It feels like what Dana Holgorsen wants from the tight end are guys that can move better laterally. That's something Thomas Fidone just can't do all that well right now.
Hmm.
And that's why we're seeing Borgershire and Lindenmeyer out there more because those two also provide a good boost in the run game as run blockers as well, compared to
Yeah.
Fidone, who is more of like this pro style tight end who can can get you some stuff across the middle of the field and can push vertically, can sit on some routes, can sit along the middle of the field, can be a big body safe target, a reliable target. But that's just not what Dana Holgorsen wants from the tight ends, it seems.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And I think, we just watched it. What I think Dana Holgorsen wants out of tight end is he wants the Nate Borkachers and the Luke Lindemeyers. That's kind of, and Thomas did start the game, and I just think that false start really kind of upset everyone. Like, hey, like this is Wisconsin. There's 2 games left. We're trying to go to a bowl game. We cannot be doing these. We cannot be making mistakes like these when the offense was in the flow. Then they just had like offense. The false start just kind of like ruined the momentum of the drive and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, it's just I think Dana Holgorsen knows that he needs to run the football when he came here. And I think he thinks he has the horses to do it, and they've done it. And when you're in that position and you want to run the football and you're looking at the tight end room, you see 2 guys who are more well-rounded than maybe Thomas Fidone is. So that's why I think that we're seeing Borkacher and Lindemeyer more. And I think we're going to continue to see them.
For sure. And yeah, we'll see, what they do with Thomas Fidone this week. This is the type of game where if you're going to run like 13 personnel, this is the game to do it.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe some Elijah Judy, Ty Robinson type action in the backfield, some short yardage goal line stuff.
yeah, yeah, a lot. I mean, again, I think you're going to see a couple like tight ends, like some heavy sets, some bunch personnel. I think you're going to see a good mix of things, and on Dylan too. I think something I noticed, and I leaned over to you and we're talking about it in the press box. I think for the first time, maybe this season, we've seen him gain confidence as the game goes on. Like,
Hmm.
and I think back to watching high school Dylan Raiola, and I've watched him since he was like a freshman or sophomore, out in Burleson, Texas. Like that was such a thing for him in high school was, you know, getting the game going in the first quarter, second quarter, building the confidence, and then the second half, it's like, okay, like, there's some games where just like he takes over. That's what you eventually want. And the way Nebraska had played early this season was to kind of build up this insurmountable lead early on, like those early wins. Colorado, Northern Iowa, UTEP, like build these insurmountable leads. And so in the second half, you're kind of laying off the gas. So they hasn't had this opportunity to play through 4 quarters really. And when he has, in the middle, it's like, okay, play calling isn't there. They're playing from behind. Confidence is shot. There's like whatever issues are out there. I think it's a good sign that we saw him kind of return to that quote unquote high school form of confidence improving across 4 quarters, where by the fourth quarter, okay, he's playing with a ton of confidence. It's like, okay, if it's a close game, like you can trust, you can put the game in his hands and he can deliver.
And they kept throwing it in the fourth quarter too. Matt Rule even said after the game that, hey, I would have preferred more runs in the fourth quarter just to get out of there with the win. But Dana kept dialing it up. But I think it's because of Dylan was showing everybody in the stadium that he was confident and he wasn't, and he was like that pre-Rutgers type Dylan Raiola that we had saw was having fun out there and making good throws and looking confident and everything. So yeah, I mean it was fun to watch, and it's something that I think is going to continue. There's just a different vibe about him, in my opinion, and that goes along with maybe perhaps what Matt Rule said about Dana Holgorsen kind of instilling a little bit of a swagger inside of that locker room where he just brings energy just because of who he is. Everybody kind of understands it's like, oh, it's Dana Holgorsen. Like he's a well-respected dude. Like he's been around the block before. He's been a head coach the past 13 years. So everybody knows Dana Holgorsen. Everybody knows it's like offense with that guy. So I think that maybe provides a pep in the step with some of the Husker players and everything on offense. And when you have like Emmett Johnson coming out of his shell and developing right in front of your eyes and like looking like a super elusive running back right now, and he's making guys miss and making Badger defenders run into each other trying to tackle him. I mean, that gets guys going too. I mean, there's a lot of yeah, I'll just say it. There's a lot of positive momentum right now, and it's really good to have it at this point going into a rivalry game.
For sure. And it's tough, I mean, and hindsight's 2020, but it's like, hey, if Nebraska had Dana Holgorsen all season, what does this offense look like? Who knows? At the end of the day, it is what it is. The situation is what it is. But Nebraska's here. They've accomplished the goal of the season, which was to make a bowl game, to show improvement. And they've done that. They still have an opportunity to get a seventh win, potentially even an eighth win. this
Hmm.
season. So their goals are still very much on the table, and I know there's some hand wringing, but like for the most part, year one they overperformed relative to what Matt Rule typically does in year one at a program. Year
Yeah.
two, this is par for the course. I mean, this is typically what they do. And,
Hmm.
whether Dana Holgorsen sticks around or not, I think they have an idea of what they want this offense to be moving forward. They have an idea of what they want this defense to be moving forward. And I think you're going to see like um a lot of young guys kind of stepping up because they've got this year to build some confidence and had some time to, really grow and learn their assignments. And I think another offseason of John Butler, for example, in the secondary, like a full offseason with John Butler, I think is going to help that secondary a ton because you can tell. Like, I don't know if I listened back to the radio show he did last week. You can
Yeah.
tell he has a vision for what he wants that room to be. And even though the play hasn't been great this year, it's feels partly because he doesn't have his guys back there. And like they're using the personnel he inherited, but that's not the personnel he wants to be using, just in terms of frame and athleticism and what he wants both at safety and at corner.
It's going to be really interesting in the offseason with the transfer portal, how active Nebraska is on defense and especially with defensive backs. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just, I totally agree with you, Tim. John Butler totally knows what he's talking about, listening to him on that radio show, Huskers radio network. The dude knows his stuff. And I feel like, you can learn something every time you listen to him talk about it. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how active Nebraska is in the transfer portal because I agree with you. You've been on the train where you've been on the Nebraska isn't athletic enough in the back end train, and I'm hopping on with you right now. They didn't have the best game against USC. They didn't really show that much improvement against Wisconsin, and yeah, they are getting kind of a break going into Iowa City because I don't think Iowa is capable of what USC and Wisconsin are through the air. So it's going to be it's going to be interesting, and can't wait to go and watch this thing play out because this is a big game. Matt Rule talked about remembering last year's loss inside Memorial Stadium and the Iowa Hawkeye players waving goodbye and like wishing them happy holidays after the game after that loss. So I think this means a little something to Matt Rule and the players. They're going to get up for this. They always do. It's Nebraska Iowa. It's always going to
Yeah,
be close.
for sure. And again, for these seniors too, I mean, they've not done it in their, Ty Robinson, these guys, they want to do it. They want to get it. They want this to happen before um their season ends. Yeah, I mean, before we get out of here and kind of close up on our like Iowa thoughts, I guess. Um, can we do a Ty? I mean, I know we've talked a lot about Ty Robinson. Can we do a Ty Robinson minute of just like appreciation for what? Because like again, I listen. Like again, we can scale this all relatively, and I understand that it's like okay, there are times where it's like okay, where is Ty? Why is And at times this year too, where it's like hey, the pressure hasn't really been there from the front or whatever, and it's like you watch Ty Robinson and hone in on what he does game to game. He's a disruptor, and
He's a
every
monster.
every offense that Nebraska plays has to account for Ty Robinson. And you saw it against Wisconsin. Wisconsin's one of the better O lines that has played like one of the better O lines in the country this year,
Yeah.
despite their offensive struggles overall. It's not been on the line. They as usual have a good line. That we saw them selling out to block Ty Robinson. We saw them like to keep him out of the backfield, and it didn't matter. Like like he was a guy that they're putting 2-3 hats on, and he's in the backfield. He's just blowing up play. Like he may not be making the tackle, but he's forcing the running back to change his path, and then that running back's running right into Vincent Shavers or running right into Willis McGahee, and you're seeing that game in and game out, and yeah, he's a guy that again he's going to get drafted, maybe higher than people even expect. I'm not expecting first or second round by any means, but like, I mean, I think there's a conversation third, fourth round where it's like, hey, like, there's a need for interior big bodies that can just disrupt, that can wreak havoc, and Ty's proven to be that guy.
I thought it was cool that Matt Rule was talking about uh, kind of projecting Ty Robinson at the next level. And, he said that, he's a guy who you can get heavier if you want. He's a guy who can drop some weight for you if you want him to do that. So I thought that was kind of like an interesting comment too of, how Ty is able to do that relatively easily and kind of form himself to how a head coach or defensive coordinator in the NFL would want him. But yeah, Ty career high in tackles with 33, career high in tackles for loss with 10 and a half, career high amount of sacks with 6. He's knocked down three passes this year. He's forced a fumble. He's just a disruptor. He's a havoc creator in the middle of the defensive line. And I completely disagree if people are if some fans maybe want more out of him. Yeah, I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
not about that. Not at all. He's
right.
already doing more. And like you said, Tim, how just if you want to learn how important somebody is to a game plan, just like watch how many double teams they're taking on. And Ty is kind of living through double teams right now every single week, and that obviously creates more opportunities for everybody around him. And I don't know. He has taken the next step, and he's going to be missed next year for sure.
For sure. And I also say this, I think he's playing not out of position necessarily, but someone like I think his best fit at the next level is like a 4-3 defensive tackle. Like a guy that can kind of line up, or even like in a 3-4 system, like a 3-4 defensive end or a 4-3 defensive tackle. Like I don't think he's necessarily in the most ideal situation in this defense for his skill set, and he's still finding ways to impact the game and still finding ways to wreak havoc. And yeah, I think he's going to have a nice NFL career. I think he's set for a good career. And it's just good to see him kind of reach the potential we thought he was capable of when he arrived at Nebraska. I know it took longer than people expected and wanted, but it happened at Nebraska. It's like, would you want him to not be here? He decided to stick around. And Nebraska's better off for it this year, not just because of what he's doing right now, but what he's showing the rest of that unit. Like what Riley Van Poppel is learning from him, what Keona Davis is learning from him, what Kate Petrak and Kyson Terry, those guys have been on the sideline for practically every home game this year. What those guys are seeing every week, and those guys are going to step in this spring and try and take over and add to the defensive rotation up front. Like those guys see what Ty's doing, and there's now like there's a standard, there's a bar that's set of what you want on the interior of your line. So yeah, I mean it's going to be tough for Nebraska to replace that. They're probably going to have to find someone either in the portal or
Mm-hmm.
through high school to try and develop. And they think Riley Van Poppel and Keona
Yeah.
Davis and those guys are ready for that task, but we'll just
Mhm.
have to see. That's a topic for the offseason, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just different because Ty is like a man, and
right,
everybody behind him is like a college kid. So
right,
it's just different there.
for sure, for sure. Yeah. Before we get out of here, Iowa. Obviously, like I guess for you, how important is getting a seventh win? How important would ending a season on a 2-game winning streak over two of your biggest rivals in Wisconsin and Iowa be for this program?
Yeah, the way I see it, you've already kind of got over one hump, and that was, winning that elusive sixth game and becoming bowl eligible for the first time since 2016. But then there's another hump, and that is the rivalry game. And I know Nebraska beat them a couple years ago in Iowa City, and that was cool and all. And Garrett Nelson was letting the fans touch the Heroes Trophy and all that good stuff. It was awesome. But just the way that last year's game ended, I think is sticking inside with Matt Rule and those players and just how Iowa acted after the game. And so I think that is going to create more kind of bulletin board material. And Ty Robinson even said there was some bulletin board material with Wisconsin with what starting center Jake Renfro said in the week leading up to the game. So this anything you can use to get yourself up, I mean, do it. This is a rivalry game. I mean, it's always going to be close between these two. It always seems to be a toss up. And I think this one's a toss up right now. But if they could get that win on top of a Wisconsin win, on top of a bowl trip for the first time in forever, there's some serious momentum, and there's going to be some serious momentum built in on the recruiting trail too. I'm sure. I mean, you know more about that than I do, but yeah, ending the season on a 2-game win streak, and then potentially 3 with the bowl game, plus the fact that all the young guys are going to be getting 15 more extra practices to develop and get better, and perhaps learn Dana Holgorsen's preferred offense. I mean, that's absolutely huge. It's huge. It's huge. Very huge.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll see. Again, I'm interested to see what happens on Friday and in the weeks to come. Obviously, signing days next week, so we'll have coverage on that. And as this calendar is accelerated a little bit, Transfer portal opens next week as well. At the end of the week, we'll have midweek signing day. Transfer portal opens at the end of the week. It's going to be a time. It's going to be a hectic December.
Quick quick thoughts on Malachi Coleman intending to enter the transfer portal, Tim?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, my personal thing and where I stand on it is, the idea for Nebraska with him specifically and some of the guys in the receiver room was get him in there, and it's not going to be immediate. You're going to have to stash that guy for a year or two and develop him. And I don't necessarily think I think the idea in theory was great, but I don't know if it's like, hey, probably should have had an established receiver coach that has developed guys from like raw tools to all around receiver in the past. Like probably should have had that guy in charge. But at the same time, it's like it's also on the player. At the same time, you have to put in the work to develop. You have to put in the work in practice. You have to make the effort to maintain weight and gain weight and all those things. So I think for him, for the program, for everyone involved, I think like a mutual, like a this is probably best for everybody. Like Malachi gets an opportunity to go find
Mm-hmm.
that receivers coach out there that can develop him and can find, because he's got elite tools. And I'll say this too: don't confuse elite tools with elite talent, because it takes a hop, skip, and a jump. Like there's a significant steps that need to be taken for elite tools to turn into elite talent. And yeah, there are times this year and even last year, like last year they had to use Malachi because of just
Yeah.
they needed explosiveness in the receiver room, and he immediately provided explosiveness. You didn't really need that this year. Like, yeah, there's times this year where it's like, okay, would they have preferred to have him? Sure, yeah, but like again, at the same time, this is a program that Matt Rhule is trying to run for the long term. You don't
Mm-hmm.
abandon your long term plan for any one person. You don't abandon the standards you hold for everybody in your program for one person that could hypothetically make your program a little better on Saturdays. There's a standard for a reason, and ultimately, if you abandon those standards, you hurt yourself in the long run more than anything. And Matt Rhule is all about the long run. It's all about building up for year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's never been about year 2.
Yeah, and I think it was a plan, rules plan about, when he first introduced the redshirting idea to Malachi of, sit behind and develop and learn and get bigger and stronger and work on your game behind guys like Jamal Banks and Jose Nair. Then after those guys are done, then it's your turn, to step into their role and do that and compete for that role. So maybe it's easier said than done, years past when the transfer portal wasn't a thing, but it is now. And when it's so easy to, get a change if you want, kids take it. So good luck to Malachi. He's got a lot of potential. We'll see what comes of him.
For sure. Yeah. And there's going to be more, they're going to have to cut down a
Yeah.
good bit of
No,
the
there's
roster
gonna be
because
like
it's
30
one
or
of five.
40 kids.
For sure. So we'll see, kind of who leaves and what happens. I mean, this offseason is just going to be a mess. But that'll do it for us. We'll
Yeah.
be back next week, and we will see you all on Friday.